Welcome to the Future Thinkers podcast. This is episode number 40, and this is the second half of our interview with Dr. Kirby Surprise. In this episode, we talk about the stranger side of synchronicity and consciousness, like psychedelics, shamanism, and magic. To get the show notes, links, mentions, and books from this episode, go to futurethinkers.org/40.
This episode is brought to you by Eternity. Eternity is building a new scalable blockchain technology that has applications in a lot of industries like finance, insurance, supply chain management, gaming, and the Internet of Things. We're really excited to have these guys as a sponsor of our show because their vision is aligned with us. They care about the same elements of the future as we do, and they're actually building technology that could have a really positive impact on the future. They just had a successful first leg of their contribution campaign in April and raised $5.5 million in cryptocurrency. If you missed it and you still want to participate, the second leg of the campaign starts on May 29th, so that's coming up really soon. To find out more, go to futurethinkers.org/AE.
Before we get into this, I want to say thank you to our recent patrons and donors, Donald, Tim, Tathra, and an anonymous person who sent us Bitcoin. Thanks for helping the show.
Welcome to futurethinkers.org, a podcast about the evolution of technology, society, and consciousness. I'm Mike Gilliland.
And I'm Yuvia Ivanova.
To get notified of new podcasts and videos, go to futurethinkers.org and subscribe to our mailing list. You can also find us on iTunes, Stitcher, and YouTube.
If you like what we do and you want to help us make more podcasts and videos, give us a like or a review, share it with your friends, and consider becoming a patron. Go to patreon.com/futurethinkers. If you're looking to get serious about meditation, check out the meditation app that we've created with Vinay Gupta called The Cutting Machinery. Go to cuttingmachinery.org/app.
Last but not least, if you want to get access to more content, hidden episodes, or if you just want to chat with us and previous guests, then check out our community at community.futurethinkers.org.
It's interesting, actually, you talked about your personal spirituality a bit, and I appreciate that you didn't let that seep too much into your book, but I'm curious just to kind of hear about your own personal biased perspective.
Well, okay, my own personal perspective is I'm a shaman, and shamanism is about changing your state of consciousness and exploring.
Are you familiar with Jason Louv?
No.
Okay, so it's pretty much what this guy's about. He's learned the magical and shamanistic traditions from around the world for the last 15 or 20 years. He's teaching these practices to people, and I was binging on his videos yesterday, and he's talking about all about this stuff, and he was talking about creating your own reality, not through affecting the world, but kind of through changing your own operating system.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm suggesting people do. First, you got to recognize your operating system, and I'm hoping people will use synchronicity to do that. The overall model that I'm seeing is the theosophical model seems to be correct across all cultures, all religions. I mean, I'm not into the organization, but the sort of Alice Bailey breakdown of planes of consciousness generally seems to be correct. And most shamans who, run around and, on the astral plane and talk to folks there and, eventually, if they're lucky, they bump into the mental plane. The patterns seem to be pretty much the same. So, Theosophy had some political problems, but if you read it, the whole thing, if you read the entire movement from beginning to end, they were making an attempt to translate all the spiritual doctrines into something that made sense. Generally, it seems like they did a fairly good job.
How does psychedelics play a role in generating synchronicities?
Well, I'm trained as an ayahuasquero.
Really?
My doctoral dissertation was the effect of hallucinogens on personality traits. Whenever you alter the brain chemistry, you get events that match the alterations. So ayahuasca, for instance, is incredibly stable. You can get synchronistic events, but not usually, not much. Serotonin-based drugs like LSD cause huge influxes of very powerful synchronistic events, but they're also reflectively creating huge imbalances in the way the brain processes information at the same time.
In a detrimental way?
Not always. Looking at the the research on, how detrimental each drug is. For instance, I've done complete literature reviews and all the research of, which drugs do what. The hallucinogens are relatively harmless. There are some toxins in things like psilocybin mushrooms and cactus, but they generally don't cause a lot of psychological harm. But the brain is going to change the way it processes information during. You can have amazing spiritual experiences on them, but, on things like serotonin drugs like LSD, you also have to know that if you take too large a dose, the imbalance is going to, whack your computer enough so that your personality disappears and dissolves, and people go through these dark nights and, of the soul and death experiences and stuff simply because the computer is not working that well. Physiologically, the research now is they're doing psilocybin for people who are terminal to better adjust them to upcoming death experiences. That's working really well, actually. The original hope for LSD was that it was a treatment, that, you could give someone a set series of maybe 6 experiences and it would cure their neurosis or their alcoholism or whatever it was that they were trying to do therapy on. And that just doesn't work. The personality rebuilds itself in basically the same pattern. MDMA looks like it's going to be really good for post-traumatic stress disorder. Ayahuasca is stable as a general accelerant. It's sort of like the quickening. You're boosting your brain's activity rate by about 120%, which means that your environment doesn't change, but you get an overlay of all this other brain processing. So a lot of the stuff you see is subliminal images. The legends about it producing telepathy are true. The thing is, most people can't stand to take this stuff very often because it's not an easy ride usually. It takes about 2-year apprenticeship before you stabilize out on the stuff and can use it, at will.
Interesting. What would that apprenticeship mean? Like to teach it, or to what do you mean by stabilize it on your own?
Like to become a traveler who is able to gain anything from it, or to become a guide?
Well, you can do circles and be a guide at any level of experience, whether you're a good one or not, it's up to the results. Let's see how the best way to put this. It's a good general amplifier. So parts of the transpersonal world or, psychic world that are unavailable normally become available temporarily. However, the brain is also like overclocked while you're doing this. So it tends to process personal material that needs to be done. It overcomes the neurological patterns that help keep repressed material in place. So basically it brings out all your personal demons real quick. But it also resolves them. It also gives the brain the processing power it needs to be therapeutic. If you're interested in the neurology and biochemistry of it, I wrote an article, it's out on the internet, called The Ayahuasca Effect, which talks about all the neurotransmitters and what produces the experience and what the benefits of it are. As a substance, my dissertation was I took a group of frequent users in North America. So I filtered out like the Sanadaime users and the Unida Vegetal users and went with Westerners who were not doing it as part of a church because the belief systems are confounding. And I found that overall it has mild beneficial effects across about 20 different scales on the MMPI, but it's not innately that way. It's simply producing more neurological energy. So the folks that said that, it's an absolutely sacred medicine and, it's permanently beneficial, they were wrong. And the people that said that it's an evil drug because it's a hallucinogen, they weren't quite correct either. It's a general amplifying tool. Shamanism is about trying to play with your experience to learn something that you can bring back that might be of benefit to the people around you. I don't consider, just personal exploration sort of shamanism. I've tried to add what I've learned to my practice. I'm sort of a licensed shaman because I'm a licensed psychologist and clinician. But, you have to be careful because, there's always people that are going to misuse it. They're going to take too much of it. They're going to enter it without the set and setting. But it's tricky. Ayahuasca is DMT and 4 antidepressants, harmine, harmaline, and tetrahydroharmine.
I didn't know those were antidepressants.
Yes, harmine was the first antidepressant.
Whoa.
Between the First and Second World War, they had this big TB outbreak, and they were trying all kinds of stuff on troops who had TB to see if they could help them. And they tried giving them large doses of harmine, and it did nothing for the TB, but it improved their mood tremendously. And they had discovered the first antidepressant. It's still the best antidepressant. The problem with it is that, if you're taking it and do tyramines, you can give yourself a hypertensive reaction and stroke on it. So if you're going to take it, you have to be smart enough not to drink beer or wine and not to eat aged proteins and stuff like that, like, blue cheeses, things like that, aged. So the drug companies couldn't deal with the liability. So they decided to not prescribe them very often, and they came up with a whole slew of other ones. But the MAOIs are still the best antidepressants. Their action in ayahuasca, besides each one of those three harmine variants and the DMT molecule, is only like 2 or 3 atoms off of real serotonin. So they lock onto the serotonin receptors in the brain quite well. And they give this incredible antidepressant reaction while the brain is accelerated and able to work on its issues better. So it gradually has a long-term beneficial effect. The original studies of people taking ayahuasca in Peru found that the populations that were taking it were healthier physically and emotionally and better psychologically organized than the matched control groups, which is where I started getting interested in it. DMT itself is fun. Obviously, it's a gorgeous experience. The smoked version by itself is not particularly shamanic, though. It'll give you short glimpses of what your brain is actually doing behind the scenes. Those floridly lovely visions are neuroprocessing. You are seeing data processing occurring in your brain in real time. Okay, those images, all and every color, all have data valence to them. Every little image within an image within an image in a pattern, in a larger pattern, is the brain processing associations and sensory inputs. It's a wonderful way to get familiar with the miracle of how your own computer works. Not particularly valuable shamanically, and doesn't really last long enough for like a great spiritual gig. I think the liquid ingestible versions of ayahuasca last 4 hours. They're, don't have to necessarily be as intense, and I think they're much more tolerable. My impression is that you can't do smoked DMT every day, because eventually, you're going to exhaust the brain cells and the mitochondria are going to burst, and, you'll wind up with some cell loss. The liquid version you can take every day. It's harder to tolerate, but there's nothing toxic about it. The LD50 on ayahuasca, the typical liquid dose is about 25 milliliters. The LD50 is 7 liters, 7,000 cc's. And at that point, the water shuts down your kidney, so there's zero toxicity. Sort of the conundrum is the exalted states of consciousness people look for are all corollaries of very high activities of cell firing in the brain. So, if you're going to try to touch the face of God, basically, you're going to be burning your neurons to do it. And what happens to some people that, have these sort of LSD after effects when they've gone on too many rides is you keep the cells active for too long. The mitochondria that produce the antosine triphosphate to power the cells exhausts, and then the mitochondria dissolve, releasing toxic crap that kills the cells. It's the same thing that happens to meth users. What burns them out is they jack the cellular activity of the neurons up so high that the cells die eventually. I think that done reasonably, your brain can tolerate almost anything. But, that's sort of the skill involved, is, being rational about what you're doing, not doing harm with it at the same time. I think one of the most unfortunate things in most societies is they place, legal limits on the things you can experiment with because 1 or 2% of people are going to do themselves in with it. And that restricts the freedoms, and the cognitive freedoms of everybody else.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on microdosing?
With ayahuasca, it works quite well. I take a small amount of it every day.
Really?
Yes, for years, many years.
Wow.
Whoa.
Yeah, so mostly what I do is DMT is minimal. I use the first plant, the vine. I get the harmine out of the northern version, which is the Syrian roof seeds. I refine it myself. And what I do is I do it before I go to sleep. And on the theory that most of your brain processing occurs while you're sleeping. Most of the upkeep and, memory consolidation all happens, while you're sleeping. So I give my brain its little boost while I'm asleep, so it can do that. And it works. It works quite well. The other strange effect it has is the Syrian rue, the harmine, is I seem to be aging slower. I'm almost 60, and physically I think I'm about 43 or 44. When I stop taking it, my hair starts going gray. And when I go back to taking it, my hair colors again. And I think what's happening is the harmine the MAOI in it keeps your natural serotonin, dopamine, and norepinephrine from being wiped out between firings of your nerves. Between neurons, there's a synaptic gap, which usually gets cleaned between each firing, which means that the body sends out chemicals that destroys those modulating neurotransmitters. When you do an MAOI, that is in the vine or the seeds, it stops that from happening. The monoamine oxidase gets wiped out. So your natural levels of serotonin, dopamine, and norepinephrine stay high. And I think that increases the neurological efficiency of the brain considerably, including the brain's ability to regulate physiological responses and processes. There are legends about these ayahuasqueros all over South America who live well past 100, and they're still pretty spry. And they all say it's because of this medicine. And I think what's happening is it's giving them enough neurotransmitters on board so the system can properly regulate itself instead of being, depleted by stress and poor nutrition and all that kind of stuff.
Wow.
What do you think about the Western magic tradition? Have you had any experience with that yourself?
Yeah, I've pretty much, there's little pieces of it I haven't delved into, but I've pretty much been through all of it. If I had to peg myself into traditions, I'd sort of say I was a Buddhist pagan shaman.
This is so interesting, this additional layer to you that wasn't talked about in the book.
Yeah, I had a hint that there might be something, because I think you actually mentioned magic in the book once, but you kind of just glaze over it and then move on to something else.
Yeah, synchronicity is probably the core of all practical magic. I mean, real magic is thought form engineering. Just that's what it comes down to, is understanding how to construct and utilize thought forms, which is what causes synchronicity anyway. The rest of it is ways to focus your attention. All the ceremonial stuff, all the symbolic stuff is ways to keep your attention and your emotion on the same thing, on the same outcome, the same symbol, which is why magic gets really tricky. Magic is supposed to be working on the emotional and mental bodies and their connection to the soul. It's not supposed to be used to, make your bitcoins go up and down, or whatever it is. I mean, it's supposed to be developmental. That's what real magic is. I think, there's nothing wrong with, looking for mates and material support and stuff, but, the real uses of it are spiritual. I think that's where, a lot of modern shamanism falls down. A lot of traditional, too, is, they have this disconnect between magic and spirituality, which is completely artificial.
This is interesting. Someone mentioned before, who we had on the podcast, Vinay Gupta, exactly what you said, that we've evolved to manipulate probabilistic events, and that when you tie certain things to reproduction or just the basic level evolutionary drives, the ability to create synchronicities increases vastly. Tying in things that we want to the production in our relationship, so having kids. And it's interesting how much the synchronicities improve. If you want a house or you want a lot of money or something like that, you visualize the house with the wife, with the kids playing, and that seems to be the sort of magical effect in this.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, if you look at the Catholic Church in the 12th century, I mean, the reason they did all their papal bulls against sexuality is because they believed people were using sex magic against the church.
What?
When in fact, anything that produces pleasure gives out a positive signal, and it does work. The other thing is it's what you're looking for too. It's like if you keep yourself in a positive space, that's what reflects. And it's not an immense influence. I mean, but if Ryan was correct and you're getting a 3 to 6% bump in probability, then on a daily basis, that's 3 to 6% more opportunity in the environment than you had before. And, that's actually a huge amount. I mean, people look for jobs and strange things happen that provide them with the jobs. And it's a reflection of what they look for.
Do you think people can improve their synchronistic abilities beyond that percentage?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. It's progressive. So the more you focus, the more you look for them, the more they happen. Here's the sort of conundrum, though. The vast amount of your emotion and thought are unconscious. Like I said, the conscious part's about as big as a walnut. The rest of it's automated. You can't function being aware of a huge amount of the automated processes. It's too distracting. That's why the brain's specialized. You can get to the point where almost everything that happens to you is synchronistic in some way, but you're flooding yourself with information. You start to experience not only the major things you're concerned with, but also all the minor things you're concerned with, and all the associations to all those things, and all the associations to those associations. So, you can basically wind up walking around with your head up your ass if you're not careful.
Which is why you turn it off every once in a while.
Yeah. And for me, the opportunity for self-delusion is too great, to run it up to that level. I mean, I have a family, I have kids and a job, and it's like, those are the real concerns, and it's, synchronicity is play for me. And there's parts of me I can check in with, but, it's sort of like when I use tarot cards. I gave up using tarot cards because I got so good at synchronicity that the cards always said exactly what I was thinking. It's like I even had it, which is, you can talk to your unconscious. It's a person through this. That's my most fun thing to do is you pretend that your own unconscious, which is your best partner in the world, is talking to you through the events in the environment. And, and of course, there's things it doesn't know, but it's fun because one reading is a really important life issue I had and I needed it solved. And, I got desperate enough to grab my deck of tarot cards, which I only do twice a year. And I, did this cross layout, and the meaning of it was stop asking me for meanings that you already know. The reading said, yes, I'll tell you anything you're already thinking. Is that what you want?
I do that too when I'm walking around, especially by myself. I pretend my subconscious is talking to me in the events external to me. Excellent.
Lots of games you can play. It really is about learning self-awareness,
Is there a reason you haven't put more of this content out on the internet?
I got a busy family life and friends and a job. And the whole idea with the book was to keep myself out of it. So, I watched The Secret come out, and the amount of self-promotion that goes on is nauseating. And I just am not wired for that. I mean, I had my own shamanic groups and circles, and I was an ayahuasquero, and it's no. It's not, people want to make it about the guy who's delivering the message. And too many people are trying to make their money delivering a message. And I don't want to do that. I'm a clinician. I help people face to face. I'm a real psychologist. I don't want to, usurp somebody else's reality, or become the focus of somebody who should be focusing on themselves. So the idea of the book was to try to give examples, personal examples of what it's like, but take myself out of the picture. I do believe, and maybe delusional, that the people who need to find this book badly enough, it'll come to them. They will find this model. They will be confused about synchronicity. They'll search the internet and they'll bump around and, they'll run into this idea that you're doing it. So that's the basic intent. I don't want to be the guy like promoting his book all over the place. I just want the information to be out there and available.
So if something happened, like someone super famous who talks about this kind of stuff promoted your book and all of a sudden you had thousands and thousands of followers, would that be a negative thing?
Yeah. I had that happen when the book first came out. I just did AM Coast to Coast again a couple of weeks ago. That's like a 12 million worldwide audience. But, I walk a line of making sure I'm not self-promoting at the time. People are the source of this. It's not me. It's not like, aliens or, magical owls. People are doing this themselves. And distracting people's attention from that is a disservice. It's a simple concept, really. You can go down the rabbit hole of theory for forever, and it's fun. But the simple concept is, don't believe stuff just because you think it, and you are affecting the meanings you're perceiving in your environment. People don't need training programs to realize that. They need to play with it.
Right. They need to experiment. Interesting. I'm a little sad that this information isn't more out there, but it doesn't affect me personally, but the network we're a part of would definitely appreciate this. And every time I ask, have you read this book? Have you read this book? It's a no.
Well, I'm willing to talk to people. I'm not willing to give my life over to promoting stuff, though.
Yeah.
How do you balance the sort of the normal job, quote unquote, and the family life with all this stuff?
By necessity.
Probably less visibility, UV, I would imagine.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, when I first started writing the book, my biggest fear was that, I would be regarded as a crank because no one had come out with this before. So I got the book published, and I was, worried because, I got this really conservative job. It turns out that the academic world, the neuropsych world, and the physicists all backed me. Everybody, I got some really heavy hitters said, yeah, that's how it works. We think so. Then when I started teaching people how to work with their clients, the ones that they thought were psychotic, and then taught them how to actually produce the events, it became pretty self-evident that it worked. So it became a lot easier. It's the same gig for anybody with a professional career and kids and a family, There's times when it's difficult and you do the best you can and you always give the kids the priority,
Mm-hmm. All right, guys, that's it for the show. Thanks for listening. If you want to get any of the mentions, books, anything we talked about in the show, go to futurethinkers.org/40 for the show notes.
Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you guys in the next episode. Bye.
Bye. Thanks for listening to the Future Thinkers podcast. To get notified of new podcasts and videos, go to futurethinkers.org and subscribe to our mailing list. You can also find us on iTunes, Stitcher, and YouTube.
If you like what we do and you want to help us make more podcasts and videos, give us a like or a review, share it with your friends, and consider becoming a patron. Go to patreon.com/futurethinkers. If you're looking to get serious about meditation, check out the meditation app that we've created with Vinay Gupta called The Cutting Machinery. Go to cuttingmachinery.org/app.
Last but not least, if you want to get access to more content, hidden episodes, or if you just want to chat with us and previous guests, then check out our community at community.futurethinkers.org.